the number of companies that we're working with, sub 100 people, and started selling, say, I don't know, 12 to 18 months ago, and are over 100 million in run rate, is just insane. It's not like twice as fast as SaaS companies, not 3 times. It's like 5 to 10 times as fast. It's not exactly the same. Run rate's different than ARR. A lot of it could go away. A lot of it's experimental, like et cetera, et cetera. Like all the caveats aside, it's still insanely impressive, both from a human efficiency perspective and from a like rate of growth perspective. And, part of that's AI, like a huge part of that's AI.
I think you actually tweeted this a couple months ago. There's that rule of, in SaaS, you get to $1 million in revenue and ARR, and then you go
triple, double, whatever.
Yeah. And then you can go public, and you get like 100 million in revenue the next year.
Every part of that is broken now. Every single one.
That's like monthly.
Literally
now.
Every single element of that is broken.
Yeah.
And especially the going public part.
Welcome to the PEO. I'm your host, Turner Novak, founder of Banana Capital. Today's guest is Eric Vishria, general partner at Benchmark.
And then an entrepreneur says something, they have an insight, they have something that just makes it click for you. And you're like, nobody's ever said that. No one's ever made me think that way.
Our conversation gets into how Eric makes new investments, startups going 0 to 100 million in ARR in 12 months, and how AI is changing company building and quality of revenue.
The one thing we can conclude is that customers are finding the product experience to be magical, and therefore they're willing to spend money on it. Right now, with a bunch of the AI companies that are growing really fast, the moats are pretty thin, but there is a speed moat. Peter Thiel had said this, NVIDIA has 125% of the profits of AI so far. And so,
because everyone else is negative. And they're like,
and that's probably understated.
We get into the risk rewards of Series A's today, how Benchmark competes to work with the best founders, and why the best storytellers win.
It matters so much in all of these different contexts. And the people who can do it the best consistently win. They consistently do better.
We also talk about parallels between the 90s, 2000s, and today, and how the archetype of successful founders is changing.
The world doesn't want startups to exist. The world doesn't want new startups to succeed. The world's indifferent to them. And so the very act of existence or growing is it's like an act of will. And will requires spikes. It requires fight and grit.
A quick thank you to Sajith at Benchling and Spenser Skates and Amplitude for helping brainstorm topics for Eric. A reminder, I publish new episodes of The Peel every week exploring the world's greatest startup stories, just like this one. Now, a quick word from Bolt before talking to Eric. This episode is brought to you by Bolt. That's Bolt.new, the easiest way to turn a text prompt into a full stack web and mobile app. Bolt is one of the fastest growing software products ever, hitting 50 million in ARR 5 months after launching, and regular listeners of the show might remember when I had Eric Simons on, where we went deep into their 7-year journey to overnight success, including almost shutting down a few weeks before launching Bolt. They're now hosting the world's largest hackathon with over $1 million in prizes, kicking off May 30th. Over 30,000 people have already signed up to build apps with AI, no coding required, 50 IRL meetups worldwide, and over $1 million in prizes. Whether you're a founder, creator, student, or anyone sitting on an idea, this is the moment to try it. It's free to join, and you can win real prizes like best one-shot prompt, top build in public journey, and most likely to get funded. Sign up now at hackathon.dev. Tap the link in the description or head to hackathon.dev. This episode is brought to you by Numeral. Numeral is the end-to-end platform for sales tax and compliance. They handle registration, ongoing filings, and their API provides sales tax rates wherever you need them with all the integrations you need. Numeral supports over 1,000 customers in both the US and globally. And they pride themselves on white glove, high-touch customer service. Plus, they guarantee their work, and they'll cover the difference if they mess anything up. They're fresh off a fundraise, raising an $18 million Series A from my friend Chetan Puttagunta at Benchmark. If you want to put your sales tax on autopilot, check out Numeral at numeralhq.com. That's NUMERALHQ.com for the end-to-end platform for sales tax and compliance. Thank you, Bolt and Numeral. And now let's talk to Eric.
Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think this will be fun. We're going to talk investing, AI, building companies, lessons learned, a lot of different stuff.
Well, I feel lucky to be one of the few investors that you actually have on, so I appreciate that.
I've had this no VC policy, and I'm trying to stick to it so hard, but like every once in a while, like I'll have somebody come through. So
there are a lot of VCs, so we're going to overwhelm you.
Yeah, it'll instantly will fill up like 10,000 episodes.
Yeah. They have a lot of incentive too.
Well, so interesting thing I heard you say once, I thought was, I mean, kind of an interesting topic to start with. You've said that for every single investment you've made, you know almost immediately when you show up that like this is a founder I want to back. Can you just talk about that?
I wouldn't say when I show up, but I would say like I build conviction quickly. And some VCs tend very positive. So we have like a positive disposition. So we're more inclined to get excited. And then others are like less inclined to get excited and like kind of more skeptical oriented. I would say I'm more inclined to get excited. And then, diligence or my partners or whatever, everyone like backs me off. Like I kind of like work that way,
Okay.
so people work differently.
Okay.
In terms of what their excitement is. But for me, I walk in and you meet somebody and, a lot of times if I like learn something very quickly, like if I, especially if I'm spending a lot of time in a space and then an entrepreneur like says something that like makes me think, they have an insight, they have something that like just makes it like click for you. And you're like, huh, like I meet companies every day. I talk to people every day. I read stuff all the time. And like, nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever like given me that insight. No one's ever made me think that way. So like, that's like a really good thing for me. So that's like one thing that like really happens.
So just like the eye-popping stat or like the new piece of information that kind of like changes your view of something.
Yeah. And I would say like, to be clear, it's not a metric normally. Like it's very rarely a metric. Actually, I don't think it's ever been a metric. It's an insight. Like it's a view of a market or a lens. A long time ago, I worked with this designer who was from IDEO, and he said this thing which I really like think about sometimes, which is he's like, a lot of times like the most important thing isn't the solution, but it's like framing the question correctly. And I kind of think of that with the insight, which is like, it's like, hey, like everyone's like looking at this market or looking at this opportunity. And it's like, okay, well, this is our vector of attack. And if you do it this way, and you're like, huh, that kind of makes sense. Like, so there's kind of an insight thing on it. And then, the second thing that really happens to me a lot is you meet somebody and they just feel like a learner. And I've described this before, but like they're the founders who come in and they feel like they're just like sticking a vacuum to your brain and like just sucking everything out of it. Right. And when you have that feeling, like where like someone's like, just basically downloading your brain into their brain. And then you kind of think about it and you're like, wow, if this person does this like 3 times a week for 10 years, right? That's like 1,500 brains that they've downloaded into theirs.
That's a lot of brains.
A lot of brains. And so that level of learning or compounding is just, and you feel it, like you almost feel it. And so it's actually also, it's become a realization for me is like, I almost don't care where an entrepreneur starts in terms of like their like sophistication around company building, as an example, and so care so much more about their slope or their like rate of learning. Because if the rate of learning is really steep, then like it really just doesn't take that long to just compound past everybody. And so like, every once in a while, it doesn't happen that often, obviously, but like every once in a while you meet someone, you have that chemistry, you get the insight, you feel like they're a learner, and then I get really, really excited about that.
So how do you tell that somebody's good at learning? Because you could be saying this to me and I could tell you like, oh, I'm a good learner.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you know?
It's subjective. Like it's a feeling, I guess it's a feeling.
Is it the type of questions they ask? Or
I think it's the type of questions they ask. It's like when you ask questions of them, do they understand the question behind the question? Are they digging into the insights? Are they like trying to get to the bottom of things? Do they feel like they're reasoning from first principles? Like you feel like, oh, this person's like reasoning from first principles. Are they afraid? Are they willing to ask dumb questions? Like, are they willing to ask questions that just seem like really basic back to you? Are they pushing on it?
So you think if somebody asks a basic question, that's actually a hidden
It can be.
indicator of it? Really? Okay.
It can be. And even when they, you'll say something and they'll see like, why did you say that? And they're just like willing to ask, because I think that's a good sign. Like, just like, hey, I'm confident enough, but also like willing to ask. So I think there's just kind of this like feeling about it. But there's another thing about it, which is like, you'll see it in the evolution of their story, like the narrative of the company, the reason for the company existence, the reason why the company will win, like hangs together. Like it's like a cogent story. And a lot of times, it's funny. We invest at the very early stage of Benchmark, right? And probably, I don't know, a third to half of the investments that I've led for us have been initial capital. So like that happens all the time. And, I would call them like straight to A's as the way I think about them. But like they're just like, you're just like, okay, this is a thing. It's going to be a thing. Like, we're going to do it. In those cases, like you're trying to figure out, like, does this person have like an insight on the market, and like, does the whole story hang together in such a way that I don't know if it'll work or not. Like, you're taking a lot of risk. Like, these are early stage investments. Some of these companies are going to work, some of them aren't. And like, that's okay. And I think that's like that's actually one of my learnings from my own experience, and everything else is like, you can have great people, you can have the right market, and for reasons that are like just external, things can work or not work. Like, and so I feel like, I think that's one of the things that's very special in Silicon Valley is we don't have to, like, working or not working isn't like, if something doesn't work, it could just mean that it just didn't work. Like, it's like, fine. Like, it's totally okay. And I think that's a really special thing about the Valley. But you kind of like look at it and you hear the story and you're like, if that works, that could really matter. And like, the story is like really cogent. And like, we have kind of example after example of that, where it's just like, I don't know if that'll work or not, but like, it kind of hangs together.
Those
Like,
are always
it's
my
possible.
favorite checks and favorite founders, and
Just
just
the best.
like products and companies where it's like, you basically explain to someone, like, you kind of caveat it with, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but here's what they're doing. And
Yeah.
and you kind of, there's like a thesis and sort of like
Yeah.
a problem they're trying to solve. And you kind of, you finish and you're like, yeah, that could be a really good idea.
Yeah, that
You just
could be a
don't
really
know.
good idea.
Yeah.
That's like one of my favorite. The Cerebras one for me is, it's an AI chip and systems company. And
That one, this is the one that they filed to go public.
they're filed
or
to go
something?
public. Yeah,
Okay,
they're on file.
what's the latest with
they're
that?
on file. Well, I mean, we'll see when this thing gets published. But like,
Okay.
I would say, they're whatever. There was the Cepheus thing and like all this other stuff. But the cool thing, I've worked on the company with Andrew, who's the founder and CEO, or co-founder and CEO, since inception. So like, since the very beginning, it was 5 founders and like this, and it's a semiconductor company. And so it's capital intensive and it has these challenges, but it's like one of these things. It's like, what do I know about hardware? Like, I know the answer is nothing, like literally nothing. But when he came in and pitched, it was like, I don't know if this will work or not. This is 2016, like March of 2016.
Oh, so there was no like semi talk. NVIDIA was still like not even. It wasn't even a crypto
like a
company.
$30
yet.
billion company at that point in time. Like, not a $3 trillion company.
Yeah.
And Google hadn't announced their TPU yet. Like, this is like way before all this stuff, right?
So what was the pitch then? Like, how did they get you excited when there was no real, other proof points that were super public around it?
So the cover slide and the second slide was the team. The team was legit. They've been around forever doing like semi and system startups. So like, you were like, okay, These guys are pros.
So you didn't even know necessarily it was a semi company yet. It was just the team.
The first one was a team, and then
Okay.
the next thing was, the next slide was basically GPUs actually suck for deep learning. They just happen to be 100 times better than CPUs.
Okay, that's an interesting pitch.
But it's provocative. Like,
Yeah.
But talk about insight, right? You're talking about insight, and you're sitting there, and remember, this is pre-transformer, obviously way pre-LLM, like it's pre any of this stuff. This is like early. I don't even know if OpenAI was founded yet. Like that's the stage that we're talking about, right? It's like in that era, and so you have, but they're saying this, and you're like, and as soon as you said it, you're like, wait a minute. Why would a graphics processing unit be the right solution for AI or deep learning at the time? And you're like, yeah, it might not. And then obviously went into like, well, these are the characteristics of the workload, and these are the things that we would build in our solution. And you're like, that could work. Like that could work. That's a really and if it worked, right, it could be really, really valuable. And which is obviously, ultimately what matters in venture is the asymmetry, right? And so I think that's like kind of a good dynamic where you're just like, okay, the thesis like makes you think. And I kind of love stories like that.
Yeah, well, speaking of stories, so Saji at Benchling said one of the things he's learned from you is the importance of kind of the company narrative and the story. I'm not sure why he asked me to ask that specifically, but it sounds like maybe you guys have something there. But like, what's the importance of it? It sounds like you just talked about it a little bit.
One of the things that I think about is as a founder or CEO, you're always pitching in some way. And I think engineers, we want to be cynical about like, hey, it's pitching. Like pitching, it sounds disingenuous. It sounds like you're like selling something. Ew, gross.
Like
but
snake oil.
Yeah, snake oil and like whatever. And I don't mean it that way. I mean it in this different way, which is like you're telling the story of why this company should exist, why you are uniquely able to do it. Like this is the company. Like why this is a real problem. Why is it this company? And like why are you going to win, right? And if you kind of think of it in that context. When you talk to customers, you're doing that. When you're talking to prospective employees, you're doing that. When you're talking to partners, you're doing that. When you're talking to investors, you're doing that. That's the job. Like that's what you're doing all the time, right? And you're doing that again and again to your employee base and to everyone else. And you're constantly iterating and editing the story. And so, I think it's like easy to kind of cast that aside and like whatever, but like actually I think it's everything, and it matters so much in all of these different contexts, and the people who can do it the best consistently win. Like they consistently do better. And I think part of the reason that they consistently do better is because smart people on the other side of it are like, wait a minute, that doesn't hold together. And then you're like, oh yeah, you're right. That doesn't hold together. I need to fix something about that. Or something changed in the world that's going to have to cause me to rejigger my story. Or like we have this like challenge. Maybe it's a customer concentration issue, or maybe it's like 2 quarters of flat growth, or like maybe it's like whatever. It's like, can be any problems are going to occur all the time. And like a lot of times those problems occur, or those like idiosyncrasies in a company happen for like really good reasons, and you need to be able to explain them. And sometimes they happen for like really not good reasons, and you need to be able to introspect and like address them. And so, but I think all of it, the kind of like the test of that, or the source of that, is really the company narrative. And at the end of the day, I think the CEO owns that company narrative, and it's so important. And I can see like a real difference between the CEOs who like really own that and like lean into it and spend time on it, and the CEOs who don't. And so I think it really matters.
Do you know why some maybe lean in or out in certain ways? Like, is there a certain characteristic of a CEO that might lead you to enjoy it or understand why you should do it more? Or?
To some extent, it's like about ambition, right? Because if you're like super ambitious, then you're telling me a story that's like really big, right? And you understand like every little layer of that story as it breaks down to all the way down to where you are today. It's all, layers of an onion or something like that, and you could look at Elon as an example of this, where he's just a master. Like,
Oh yeah,
he's
like
unbelievable.
the going to Mars thing.
Yeah,
I'm like,
amazing.
that feels pretty far away, but you got people bought into it.
Yeah, and it's not even going to Mars; it's colonizing Mars, right? It's like literally like interplanetary life.
Yeah, we need to become an interplanetary species. Like that is, I don't think you can give a bigger kind of like TAM.
So we start there,
yeah,
and he comes all the way down to like, okay, we need to launch a rocket. And then we need to launch a rocket, and the rocket needs to be reusable. And then we need to have multi-forms of that rocket. And then we need to be able to take like satellites, and then we need like, and it's just like keeps on building on the story. And they're like, oh, we need robots to be able to like address things or like work in space, Mars, whatever it is. Yeah. Like, and so like the dude has a story and it kind of hangs together. We're not a car company, we're a battery company, and like whatever it is. And so like, he's like it's truly a master class of this. And like, I believe he believes it. Like, I don't think he's not trying to bullshit everybody. Like, I think he believes it, but it's like kind of it's just a great example of the nature and scale of ambition. And then therefore like how like storytelling matters around it.
So let's say you meet a founder, they blow your mind with a new insight. Very like great storyteller, very, very ambitious. You love the team. How do you usually like engage with the founder and like try to like win the opportunity to work with them, give them money? You're working together for years. Like, what does the relationship usually look like?
I mean, to me, I value, people invest for different reasons and like to do the job, like venture for different reasons. I was a founder before. I like to do it to work with founders. Like that's my North Star. That's my motivation. That's the part of the job I enjoy the most. And so, the chemistry with the founder matters tremendously. I care a lot about that. I want to spend a lot of time with the founder. I work with, founders for a decade plus. That's a very like kind of classic way we work at Benchmark. And so, for me, like if you're meeting someone like that, you get excited. Then like the next thing is to really engage with them on the substance of what they're building. And like, why are they building it? What's their motivation? How does it work? What are the dynamics behind it? What are the steps they see in the evolution? What are the questions? What are the learnings that you have from other companies that might be applicable to this one? And like, that's the kind of like engagement. It's just like, how do we maximize the probability that the founder's vision is realized, and the greatest ambition that founder has comes to life. And if we can increase the odds just a little bit of like doing that, and maybe just a little bit every quarter, if we get a little bit better like every quarter on that, then again the compounding takes over.
What are there any things you found that like move the needle the most on that percentage to get them there? Like little things that I can't, like showing up to board meetings prepared or something. Like, are there any things specific you found?
There's really so many like things that are just like, and every company and every founder is a little bit different. Like, in anything that's like post product market fit, maybe this is actually pre or post, but anything post product market fit, I just say it's like so much about like how are you like building the company itself. Like I think like good companies are durable and resilient in ways that like really matter. And sometimes you meet founders and it's like, wow, this is an amazing individual, and like that's cool, but like, does this person really want to build a company which is more than one person? And at least for now. And
maybe
right,
in the future.
Maybe in the future, but like at least for now, it's like more than one person, and there's other dynamics around it. And so like you have to be able to like build around that company. So I think a lot of it goes around in building a company, and then that comes down to like, who are you recruiting? Who's joining the company? What are their superpowers? What are your superpowers? And how does it all fit together? And so I think I spend a lot of time on that. And a lot of things it's interesting. I was listening to a Zuck podcast yesterday.
Which one was it?
Oh, it's an interview that
Was it the
Ben
Theo?
Thompson
Oh,
Thompson
Ben.
did. Yeah,
Okay.
Ben Thompson did Stratechery. Ben's a very good commentator. I wouldn't say he's like the best interviewer, but you know, what I hear in that is like, Zuck is also, he's like paying attention in the market. He's understanding what's happening in the market. He has like lessons. One of the most interesting things to me about what he said was like, I think he has a lot of remorse on not owning the mobile platform. And so one of the reasons, because like one of his questions is like, how long and is he going to continue to open source Llama? And like, why is he spending so many billions of dollars investing in Llama? And like, one of his things is like, look, I don't want there to be another platform that is like owned by somebody else that I have no control over. And I think he's, obviously a lot of frustrations with Apple and a lot of tensions on that. And I thought it was just like an interesting, like, but then you start to understand the psychology of like, okay, that makes sense. Like that's so he doesn't want like OpenAI or Anthropic or whomever else to have the model and be that to be the platform. And then like Facebook is like riding on that platform in some way. Or, Facebook is leveraging that platform for their ad assets and for their, so it kind of makes sense. Like as soon as you explained it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. So the point of it is like you're building all this company, and a lot of the company, as time, especially as the business gets bigger and bigger, a lot of the company is there to like make the company work, make the business work. And like part of what that does is it should free up the founder to be able to have like real, like lift up their eyes and have a longer strategic view and understand how things are developing and changing. And, typically that's what a founder's superpower is. And so I think that those things kind of like fit together to me.
On the notion of building businesses and that just general theme, how do you think that's going to change in the future? We just kind of talked about, there's this whole joke of like one person can build $1 billion company, and maybe it's not quite a joke anymore. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, how do you see that kind of changing in maybe your portfolio companies or what you've observed?
I think it's going to be I think there's going to be some very weird and unexpected twists and turns on this journey. Like I don't know.
Have you seen, like, what's the most interesting thing you've seen? In terms of,
I'll tell you, like, I can't. One kind of crazy thing is like in our portfolio, in the benchmark portfolio, the number of companies that we're working with, which are going to be sub 100 people, and started selling, say, I don't know, 12 to 18 months ago, and are over 100 million in run rate, is just insane. And I that's just like, it's not like twice as fast as SaaS companies, not 3 times. It's like 5 to 10 times as fast. Like, certainly 5 to 8 times as fast. And it's not exactly the same. Run rate's different than ARR. A lot of it could go away. A lot of it's experimental, like et cetera, et cetera. Like all the caveats aside, it's still insanely impressive, both from a human efficiency perspective and from a like rate of growth perspective. And part of that's AI, like a huge part of that's AI. And so like, yeah, I think it really matters.
So what's different? Because I think you actually tweeted this a couple months ago. There's that rule of, in SaaS, you get to $1 million in revenue and ARR, cute. And then you go 3x, 3x, 2x, 2x. Maybe I think I did it right.
I don't know, triple, double, whatever.
Yeah. And then you can go public, and you get like 100 million in revenue the next year.
Every part of that is broken now. Every single one.
That's like monthly
literally
now.
Every single element of that is broken.
Yeah.
And especially the going public part. But yeah, every single part of it is, and like that was cute. That was I think the tweet.
So what's the reason that these companies are growing faster? Is there like more market demand? Like, can you sell?
That this is, I think, the only thing that we can conclude. I don't think there's a lot we can conclude yet, but I think the one thing we can conclude is that customers are finding the product experience to be magical, and therefore they're willing to spend money on it. Now, how long are they willing to spend money? Is it substitutable? Are there moats? Is this durable? Like all of those, I think, are open questions and really vary a lot, like company to company and product to product. But anytime you see something growing that fast in a new category with a new capability, I think you have to say, like, there's something magical about the offering. And And so that's my takeaway. It's like, okay, there's something magical about these offerings. They're like really like customers are like, that solves a real problem. I'm willing to spend money on that. Here
Yeah.
you go. Take my money.
Yeah.
And like, okay, that tells us something.
What is the fastest growing product that you've like seen? Maybe you're allowed to talk about. Maybe ChatGPT is like
ChatGPT have to be the fastest, I think, of all time.
Yeah. Maybe what about like second or third? Like what's like the fastest thing that you think you can comment on publicly?
I mean, like I said, I think there might be like half a dozen companies that have gone like 0 to over 100 in 18 months. Like literally 0. Like that's really fast.
So how does that usually play out? Do you get one big $1 million deal? Do you like there's 100 really big customers?
I think it really varies a lot, right? Like if you look at like the Cursors of the world or whatever, I think that's
like
really
millions
like
of
$20 at a time, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, or whatever, $240 a time or wherever the way to say it is. I think that there are definitely customers that are like doing, there are definitely companies that are doing this like $10 million blocks or $5 million blocks. So I think there's every variant of it. Like it's just, I think it's astonishing the extent of like how many different flavors there are and how many different ways it works.
Yeah. So then if I'm an investor or even a founder, just thinking about, business model durability, like I want this thing to be here in 10 years. I'm trying to build a company that changes the world, solves one's problems, billions in revenue, however you want to talk about it. How would you think about just like assessing revenue quality when you're like thinking about and looking at just everything that's going on right now?
I think, and one of the things I find that like the best founders seem to be like pretty optimistic, pretty paranoid. Like they're optimistic about what they can do and what the business could do, everything else. They're pretty paranoid. And as a result of their paranoia, they move with expediency, right? And so like they have expediency and they're also like pretty intellectually honest. Like it's like in their heart of hearts, whether they say whatever they externalize or not may be different, but like they're pretty intellectually honest and might say like, hey, you know what? We have like, this is where the moats are and this is where like the moats aren't. And like, they're talking about those things. And right now, and with a bunch of the AI companies that are growing really fast, the moats are pretty thin, but there is a speed moat. And so like they're just moving faster and they have a lead that's tiny and they're moving faster than other people. And, could that translate into things over time? For sure. And I think it does.
Yeah. And to your point about this, the being limited moats, it's interesting to think about just what are actual enduring moats in a world where certain things can be automated. Like you might think switching costs or something. Like I'm going to switch you from Salesforce over to my new CRM thing. And there's a bunch of agents that just go and literally rip out every single piece of data, copy and paste and put it in. And we have like automated all the integrations and it's cloned Salesforce. Like, I don't actually know if this is a good business or not, but it's like, are there no switching costs? Like, have you figured out anything framing of how to think about like how these
I'll give you a great example of like what, I think we would say the greatest business of all time is probably search, right? Is probably Google search, right? And like from a consumer perspective, what's the switching cost of a search engine?
It's like a lot, but also nothing.
It's nothing. It's nothing, especially early days. Like again, if we go back to early days, we had. You're too young, but like there was so many search engines. That one, Ask. I mean, but dude, is
AltaVista,
Yahoo, Lycos, AltaVista, InfoSeek, a dozen others that I've forgotten, and ultimately we got Google. But like, and like literally, we switched between them.
Yeah.
We switched between them.
So then the question could be, why did Google win?
Well, it was definitively the best product.
Okay.
Like at that time, like it was like you experienced it and you were like, this is better. Like the search results were better. So like, and whether that was PageRank, whether it was their crawlers and indexers and they index more of the web or whatever it was. Okay. So that was better. 2, I think the user experience, it was fast, matters, performance matters. I think that's one of the things that we learned from them over and over again. I was definitely faster. 3, it wasn't littered with crappy display ads. That matters. And so I would like say that. So the search results were better for whatever reasons, maybe a couple of reasons for that. It was way faster, which, turns out really matters. And the experience wasn't cluttered. And so like you put those 3 things together. Okay. So like that's a start of a theory,
Yeah. Well, and I think the interesting too is if you think about search versus display ads, like they're better, like, or like more profitable, higher margin. Like you could charge
Everything's
more for
better
them.
about them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So better product, but also way more revenue.
Yeah.
Like, so,
But keep in mind, AdWords didn't come along for 3 years. Like I think Google was founded in 98. I think AdWords launched end of 01. And, and again, it wasn't their idea. Like, and just like, these are like some interesting like evolutions of this. They implemented it better. They had the volume of search, so forth. But, that came out of, Bill Gross, I think.
So you think then just the answer to just kind of all of this is just build a better product that is a magical experience?
Well, I think, but that isn't a static or point in time thing.
Okay.
It's build a better product and then stay better for a sustained period of time,
Okay,
which
yeah.
turns out to be a lot harder.
Yeah, true. That's the hard part.
But yeah, I think it's like both of those. At least, I don't know if that's true in everything. Like, obviously the social networks had network effect. Google had, in the end, I think they had a 2-sided network effect with advertisers and everything else, which probably cemented it. Then obviously they started controlling all the distribution in terms of the browsers and like the origin. So they've
got like, the operating system. They've got like TV-ish. Actually, they don't have TV. Well, the Chromebooks.
Right.
That's actually blown my mind is my daughter uses her Chromebook all the time in school.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like, it's pretty crazy,
It's
actually.
pretty crazy. Yeah. And they like went down in education and owned the funnel. So, I think there's like lots of ways to cement it over time. And so that should lead us to like understand that stuff.
Yeah. And actually, I take back what I said. They do have TV. They have YouTube. So
They
basically put their tentacles in everything.
we shouldn't look at them. I think it's unfair to look at them 2025 and compare them to AI startups in 2025. We should look at them in 2002 or 1 or 2000 and see what they said. And I would say they're like the at least superficial moat from the outside looking at it would be like, it's a marginally better search engine that's a little bit faster that doesn't make money.
Yeah. But I think it does give you a roadmap though. Like
yes,
it does tell you like what probably the next couple of decades
yes, it does.
could look like. Which it gives, I mean, I don't know. I think it's when you look at kind of where the market's with AI right now, like some of the credit we're giving companies for what the future growth might look like some of them I'm like, I don't know about that, but some of them I'm like, it's actually kind of reasonable.
Sure.
If they you never know how this is gonna go, but
well, one of the things I think about on that front is I think I can on like most of these things that seem crazy on the surface, I can make the case for or against, and which is like kind of a horrible place to be, honestly, because
it's like, come on, pick a side.
But like you could make the case for or against, and part of the reason you can make the case for or against is because like the markets are so big and the values potentially they're so valuable, right? If they work and they actually realize their promise. And of course we see the rate of evolution of any of these products and you're like, wow, like those things are evolving so quickly. So, and in terms of their increased capability. And so if you kind of think of it in that way, it's like, well, yeah, sure. If it realizes potential, it's not that crazy.
Yeah. How do you feel about just the margins of some of these products? I know that's like a big like sticking point against is like, I think OpenAI has like negative gross margins or something. Maybe that's changed.
I haven't looked at their financials, of course, but like I would say like in general, I don't really worry about it that much. Like at least, most of the margin cost is on inference. The cost of inference is going down so rapidly. So it feels like if you're, it's kind of like, would you bet on, it's not Moore's Law, but like, would you bet on Moore's Law? Like that turned out to be like a really good bet. And so I kind of don't, I don't think that's like a reason for concern. There's also pricing pressure, which I think that, there is real commoditization. There is this other dynamic, which is like the model cost development does continue to increase. Maybe that's going to plateau as pre-training becomes less important and post-training becomes more important. So like, I think there's arguments again that the gross margin thing is not really a problem, but to the extent the gross margin challenge or whatever, and the point at this point in time is inference, I don't think that's an issue at all. I think like that's probably a positive if you're willing to stomach it, because I think just a little bit of time is on your side.
Okay. How do you think then about if you were running a company, maybe you have 24 months of runway, I don't know, maybe you have 36, maybe you have 12. Just how do you think about what the danger zone is maybe with this kind of a thing? Because you don't know exactly how fast some of this stuff is going to improve.
Yeah. I mean, obviously each company is different and you're kind of constantly dialing it. I think, if you have like momentum or escape velocity or anything else, like I think you can run it pretty close to the wire, because those are pretty fundable. Like they're just fundable.
People want to give money to companies.
Yeah, people want to give money to those companies, and despite the kind of stock market volatility and everything that we've seen over the last couple months, there's so much money available for AI companies, so I don't really worry about that. I think if you don't have momentum or escape velocity or a great narrative as to why you don't, like then I think then that's a little trickier, obviously.
Where do you think most of the value is going to accrue in AI just over the next decade? I don't know if we're going to be done in a decade, but if you just go to kind of the end of this, what do you think the most valuable companies will be doing or maybe look like?
It's so funny because it's just like if you go back to the 90s, infrastructure companies, like enabling infrastructure companies, the Ciscos, the Suns, SGS, like those companies were like the initial runaways.
Yep.
Right.
Weren't there didn't NVIDIA classically have like 90 competitors, like 93 competitors?
Oh, I mean, I think there were tons for GPUs for sure. Like I'll get wiped out. Like so many of them got wiped out. Right. And it's like, but even just the runaway successes of that era, like the big market cap companies and everything were
even like AOL. So many. Would you consider AOL like a
sure? You could call it infrastructure company because just enabling access, right? It's like and so there were just so many of those at that time before we got the giant and durable consumer companies successes, right?
And is it probably because as the infrastructure got to scale, the cost came down, which then enabled the consumer companies to scale?
I think of them as like really integrated loops, exactly what you just said. And it's like, I think it's not a coincidence that like YouTube popped when YouTube popped. It's just like, broadband tipped in the United States and YouTube popped. Makes sense. Like, you know what I mean? And like, they did not take anything away from them. They did a bunch of amazing things in terms of embedding video and pages
they
and
beat
whatever.
Google Video.
But
Google had to
it's just
acquire
like,
them.
Google beat them, right? And so, and Google acquired them. And so, like, but it was just like timing matters on these things in terms of the enabling infrastructure, and then the consumer thing happens behind it. It's not a coincidence that Instagram, I think, came before Snapchat. Like pictures came before video.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's just like, it makes sense that it happened that way, given iPhones and like, I forgot if it was 3G or LTE or whatever, but like also like you needed the camera phone to get there, and then you needed enough bandwidth on the network for you to be able to send videos to your friends very quickly. And so like these things all like happen, and they're interlaced, right?
Yeah.
In terms of they feed each other, the cycle does. And so I think you'll continue to see that pattern right now. Obviously, the biggest of round one, say, of AI, the biggest winner has obviously been NVIDIA. Like, I don't think there's any other question about it. It has to be NVIDIA. Like it's and I'm not like, you can look at Marx and everything else, but I'm just saying, like, I think Peter Thiel had said this, which I think is right, is like NVIDIA has like 125% of the profits of AI so far. And so
because everyone else is negative, and they're like,
it's just like, it's so okay. And that's probably understated. So like, it's like, so like, okay, so we're going to have the infrastructure ones. In the end, though, like, will there be a giant consumer company? Obviously, like there has to be at least one. And I think there'll be tons and tons of B2B companies too that do well in all of these different verticals. So I'm like very bullish on just like the amount of stuff that this will impact.
Where would you want to invest today? Like we just talked about, maybe like how these different waves intersect in infrastructure. An infrastructure company just is at the peak. Like maybe we're peak NVIDIA, maybe we're not. But
Yeah.
What's interesting today then? Just thinking about how things are probably going to start playing out over the next couple of years.
You know, one of the cool things about our job is like, I like very much resist the top down, like, oh, here's opportunities.
You don't have your
here,
crystal
it's like
ball
a
out
crystal
and-
ball.
yeah.
Like it's so dependent on an individual or set of individuals, a set of founders who has an insight on a cool market and like really understands where the tech is and like is able to do something with it. But one of the things I have been thinking about that is really different in the AI world versus the SaaS world is in the SaaS world, you know, over and over again, you had people who like really understood the customer and the problem, and then they understood a domain. They understood that what the technology was like more or less capable of, but it wasn't like a real question. So it wasn't a real question of if you could build something. Let me give you an example. Like you take Salesforce or PeopleSoft or ServiceNow. CRM existed before Salesforce, right? Like HR management or whatever existed before people's like, and so you kind of go through that, and same thing with like ServiceNow. So in every case, like in Salesforce, in Workday, I meant Workday. I think I said PeopleSoft, but like Workday followed PeopleSoft, Salesforce followed Siebel, like ServiceNow followed these companies, Peregrine and Remedy and others. So like they were just like kind of like cloud SaaS versions of the prior generation product.
And the prior generation just like didn't build a browser native product, didn't build like an internet native.
Yeah, and they
piece
had all
software.
of the problems with it, and it was
Okay.
on-prem, and it was like on-prem, so all engineering is spending time like dealing with customers' various environments and version
was like
-2
license-based,
compatibility,
yeah.
license-based stuff, like everything that we all know and why the world moved to SaaS. They just like understood the customers, they understood the problem, and they were just like, here's a better version of this, right? And you know that evolved a little bit over time in SaaS land, but like that's what it is. And so product development in that way was done by people who like really understood the customer and the problems, and then just like took advantage of the next wave.
It was like a new technology, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was a new technology, but it wasn't rocket science. Like it was like, it was like, okay, yeah, we host it for you. Like, I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'm being a little dismissive, but like,
it's pretty easy.
It's pretty easy.
Relatively,
Like, it's like,
yeah.
it's like, and at that time, by the way, like, I think most of the initial like kind of V1 SaaS companies, like they weren't multi-tenant. Like it was kind of like, like it wasn't like so crazy. Like it was just like, we run it for you, make it better, etc. Web-based, blah, blah, blah. And so product development happened in this cycle that I think is really different. It's almost diametrically opposite of product development in the AI era. Whereas I look at the teams that are having the most success today, and they have like intimate knowledge of the models. They are like right on the frontier of understanding which models are better at what and why and when and what they're going to be good at and what they're not going to be good at. And then what they are spending their time on is like figuring out, how do I apply this capability of this model to this domain or to this user? So they're actually working like inside out or technology out versus like customer problem in. And it's kind of like of course they understand the customer problem, and a lot of times they have like firsthand knowledge of it, but they're really close to the metal and capability, and they're applying it out. And I think this is like a really different way to develop products. In some ways, I started my career as a product manager a long time ago, and like it's almost like the opposite of like everything you learned. Like it's like, hey, like listen to the customer, talk to them, understand it, then bring it back to engineering and tell them. And you came back to engineering, and it's like, if you did that right now and you asked a bunch of customers like what they want out of AI and what they want, and you brought it back, like for the most part, like it may not be possible like today with today's technology. Whereas like the teams that are winning right now, like really understand the technology and are applying it out. And so I think this reversal matters. I think it's a big difference in terms of how companies are getting built, and maybe even the types of entrepreneurs that will be successful. I'm not sure. And so I think you're seeing some like real change there.
It makes me think probably technical founders have an advantage of just like intimately understanding how the
Sure.
technology's changed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I think you look at the Brett Taylors at Sierra and you're like, that's a super, super technical founder who like really gets it. Like Brett and Clay, like really, really get it. You look at like Michael and his co-founders at Cursor, like they're super technical founders and they get it.
Yeah.
And they're like, they really understand what these things can do and what they can't do. And they're taking them out, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, that's a pretty different dynamic relative to the way like a lot of the best SaaS companies got built.
And speaking of that, when I had Spenser Skates at Amplitude on the podcast, I don't think he mentioned your name, but he was saying one of my board members, which before we started recording, he said it was you, said that you haven't really seen many kind of like legacy B2B SaaS, like this whole prior wave. You haven't really seen many that are actually fully taking advantage of AI. It's like a chatbot basically, or like adding some autocomplete like
Yeah.
generative AI
Yeah.
into the product. Like, have you seen like what is the best example of maybe one of those incumbents
you know
using
what's so
it?
funny is I think there's a set of companies which were like not working and they kind of pivoted into it. Like they just like were like burn the
YOLO.
boats.
We
Like,
have
hey,
to
you know, we
do
got to
it.
do
Yeah.
something, and they got something. And I think there's some like really you know, and there's a bunch of like stories like that. Like I think the Glean story is a little bit like that, which is kind of amazing. And what they've been able to do is incredible.
Because that's internal corporate search. You can just kind of
Yeah, internal corporate search, and I think it was like, you know, kind of sort of working, and then you layered LLMs in it, and it was just like, you know,
juiced
rocket
it.
fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
just kind of amazing. And so I think there have been a few of those where, but in terms of like companies that had something, like had a good SaaS business, and then AI came along and they were able to take advantage of it, I think that number is like much more limited. And actually, it's very hard to come up with stories of that. And but I think part of the reason is exactly what I was saying before, which is I think the product development cycle just switched and it inverted.
Yeah.
And the way you do that inverted, the pace inverted, you know, they also feel like they have something to protect, which they actually don't. So they shouldn't protect. They should just like go. But
Why don't they have anything to protect?
you know, as one of my partners said, I think you have two options. You can trade it 2 times or AI.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's just like it, you know, it's just like the growth is decelerated. And I should say this because it's like it's really important and it's part of my mentality, which is like a whole bunch of it's just not their fault. Like it's nobody's fault. It's just like the world just changed on us. Like it's
You're
just
saying like the market is saying you're worth this, and like that
yeah, and the
you're not
market
going to
condition
change that
changed
really.
it. Yeah, the market changed and the market changed. So their growth decelerated. You know, there's a new hotness that came along and people are spending their energy and time there. And there's like risk of getting disrupted from that. And so like those are the choices. Like
Yeah.
you know,
How would you think about those new technological waves? Just understanding as a founder what you should kind of be leaning into, because when I just think of maybe the last 5 years, right? We had AI, we had Web3, maybe like
this one's super easy, man.
okay.
Well, just AI's here.
Yeah, okay.
It's like it's here. It's not like it's not a 2 or 3 year thing. It's not a 5 year thing. It's like a long time thing, and I don't like. It's just it is what it is. Like,
So then how
it's
do you
gonna matter.
dissect that, and you know that AI is like really actually fundamentally changing how we're making businesses? Like, is there a
Yeah.
certain like thing, or is there a moment where you were like, okay, this is actually like we're able to do it faster, cheaper, better product, et cetera? Was there a moment where you were able to figure out internally, like, okay, yeah, this is like a real change in the environment?
I I guess it's just like you looked at the pace of evolution of them and of the companies, and you were like, oh, this is there's just like too much capability getting added too quickly, like for this not to just like really do stuff. And it's just more and more people are doing useful things with this. So you get excited about that, right? We should get excited about that. But I think it's here to stay. And I think it's really what's going to matter. I think it's going to impact a lot of other things. Like I think we're going to see AI in bio and AI in material science and you know, AI in mech and like, you know, and obviously AI is impacting things like robots and other stuff too. So I think there's like it's a little bit, the best analogy I have in analogies is historical analogies are always risky because they're fraught with all of this other weight and everything. But I think it's a bit more like the transistor than anything else, which is, it's like,
What is the transistor for people who don't know?
a transistor is a switch. It's a 1-0 basically that exists in every single thing that it exists in this microphone, it exists in these headphones, it exists in every one of these cameras, every electronics, and every one of our phones have billions of transistors.
This is what code's binary. It's like 0, 1, you're
exactly,
saying?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it processes logic, right? And so like these transistors, it was an enabling technology in the 50s. That started out as vacuum tubes. The core idea started as vacuum tubes before it became a transistor, and like then got small and portable, and you could do all this stuff with it, and it infiltrated everything. And I think AI is a little bit like that, which is it's going to infiltrate everything in all sorts of different ways. And so if you kind of think of it as an enabling technology, then you start to realize like the possibilities and the surface area of what it's going to impact is really tremendous.
Yeah, I'm even thinking about just like when we're recording this podcast, like the microphone will just like auto like tilt to like better capture you, or like the camera will kind of change, or like the lighting. If the sun hits the window differently, the camera will just kind of like adapt and like keep the picture good.
All
like anything can have it in it. Yeah.
Anything can. Like every one of our light switches now actually has transistors in them. It's just everything has it, and so it just impacts everything.
So one more question about AI. How are you using it personally? Like, do you use it?
Oh God,
in any specific ways? Like what kind of use cases it might be beyond just like ChatGPT, like, or anything specific that you use it for?
I mean, I'm a very simple person. So I would say like in that way, I don't have it's not like I do sophisticated financial analysis or anything else, because most of the companies I look at are brand new.
Yeah.
So it's not like that kind of stuff, but you're using every form of it, whether it's like ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever, and I use them on different models. I play around with the coding things like just for fun and to learn. I use the advanced voice modes on these things all the time.
Oh yeah, I feel like you said you use voice more than anything.
Yeah, I use voice a lot. So
if somebody's never used voice before, how would you recommend using it? Do you just switch it on in ChatGPT?
Just switch on and just talk to it.
You just talk instead of text?
Yeah, just talk instead of text. And it's actually amazing with my kids, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll have questions that, and it's just like a third person in the room. Like, and you're just like, and
yeah, why do polar bears, do this?
Totally.
Thing? And your kids can go crazy.
They can go crazy. My 10-year-old is super into black holes. He's like listening to these podcasts and everything on black holes, and he's trying to understand, the event horizon or some other like characteristic of black hole. And it's just like, here you go. Like, it's amazing.
Have they used Suno at all? The song?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay, yeah, my daughters love that one.
Yeah,
just
so fun.
Make a song about their favorite TV show, or daddy going on a trip and getting home, or anything. And
amazing.
they just love those.
Yeah.
How do you feel that venture has changed since you kind of first got into it? Because it was 2014.
2014 is when I got into venture.
Okay. Yeah. What have been some of the biggest changes that you've just kind of noticed?
I mean, it's much more competitive now. There's just like a lot more players, a lot more sources of capital at a lot more different levels. So like in that way, it's probably changed a lot. Companies use a lot more capital now than they did then. I would say.
Why do you think that is?
To some extent, the markets are bigger, and so the prizes are bigger. Some of it's probably inflation. Some of it's that we probably printed a lot of money. Like all of these things I'm sure contribute at different levels. I don't know exactly what the ratio is, but there's a lot of players and a lot of dynamics that way. But I look at it and I kind of think, well, on the other hand, like the outcomes are bigger, like, the chances, I think there's going to be more impact. We have a new technology wave. Like you kind of like put that together and you're like, yeah, it's not irrational. Like,
yeah. So like on a net basis, you're like, it's all pretty even. Or do you feel like we're like undersupplied on capital?
I just kind of think it's good. Like,
yeah,
it's good. Like we should want more innovation. Like it's good for humanity for there to be good innovation. We should want we should want science innovation. We should want like fundamental science innovation. We should want commercialization innovation, which is what I think of as venture, is like technology commercialization innovation.
Yeah.
And, so I think we should want every bit of it. Like, it's good.
Yeah, like I was doing a presentation to the old school. I went to like present to the finance class, like what is venture capital? Like venture capital 101. And I think the second slide, it was just a list of the top 10 largest companies in the world. And I think like 7 of them raised venture at one point. Like this is like Apple, Nvidia, Google, Facebook, Tesla. I feel like there's maybe 2 more in there.
Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft. And it's another tech company, I think. But anyways, it was like, oh wow, that's actually like VC actually has a pretty big impact on some of these companies.
Oh yeah,
no
question, question about it.
Because you maybe think it being in, I don't know, in the trenches, or maybe we're not really in the trenches as investors, but like what you're like seeing it every day. But then when you also step back and explain to someone, you're like, oh yeah, this is like a pretty simple kind of analogy or comparison you can make, and like show somebody like this is like the industry that I work in. This is what happens from it.
By the way, if you go to the next level down, so that's the biggest companies.
Yep.
But if you look at companies that are worth more than like 25 billion or 50, like pick a number, like whatever,
just like the next
50
100 largest companies.
Yeah, the next 100 largest, I think the percentage would be even higher.
Really? Okay.
Yes, it is. You'll be astonished at how many companies are like worth, or take it down to 100 and you'll be like, holy smokes, there's so many companies. And that's just incredible. Like you'll have Uber and ServiceNow and Palo Alto Networks, and like, I mean, you start like listing these things, Palantir, and like you start like listing all these companies and you're like, holy smokes, there's so many.
How do you think the industry is going to change going forward?
I don't know. I think like, look, one of the nice things with every new turn, there's new opportunities. So, if you kind of look at like some of the traditional firms that the biggest brands, like, I think Sequoia was like largely founded with Don in the semiconductor era. Benchmark was really founded in 95 with the beginning of the internet era. Andreessen Horowitz was really founded in 2009, I think, in the mobile era. And like these companies, like these firms, like were made, that they were kind of newcomers that came along in that era and like did it. And of course, like, Sequoia's continue to be relevant. Like we've continued to be relevant. I think Andreessen continue to be relevant. And like, we just like whatever. And so like, that's kind of a nice thing about it. Like, it's like a self-rejuvenating pool. And then, the other thing about it is like, it's a hustler's business. Like I think one of the things that people, it's kind of easy. We're glorified executive recruiters and salespeople, basically.
Yeah. Money salesmen.
And
basically.
we're money salesmen. It's a hard thing to sell. And like, and so, if you kind of think of it in that context, like it's a hustler's business, and obviously it can be lucrative and like so forth, but if you think of it in that context, like it's also kind of naturally, like people like naturally move on or they retire or whatever. And it's like, it makes it, and there's going to be intense competition, which is great. And we should all welcome that.
So, and I think Benchmark historically, when most people kind of bucket you, they say you guys do Series A.
Yeah.
But you did mention something earlier that maybe you're investing a little bit early. Like, does it still make sense to invest at Series A, especially when you got these companies that are like, you start it and then 100 million in revenue a year later?
Like what is Series A? Like,
exactly.
Nobody knows. Like,
yeah.
I think the answer is like, you kind of know it when you see it. Like,
yeah,
I think of it as just like maybe invest in the best companies as early as possible. Like that's probably the right way to say it. So yeah, I think of it as Series A. I define that. I kind of think of that as the first board partner. And so I would say that's probably like 80% of what we do. But like, what exactly is Series A? And is it a seed, or is it an A, or is it B? Because there's a pre-seed and a seed, and like, who knows? I don't know. I don't know the answer to it.
Have you guys changed your approach at all lately because of sort of how the market's changed?
I mean, I think like when the market is this way and like there's so much quick growth and everything else, I think you just have to open your aperture and be more flexible. in terms of what you're doing, how you're thinking about things. So I think in that way, we've probably changed things. Of course, prices have gotten higher, check sizes have gotten a little bigger. Like all those things are probably true too.
Like, do you guys say, oh shit, like these prices, like valuations are going up. We need to hit certain targets to return the right kind of capital. We should go a little earlier.
No,
we should upsize our checks.
No,
Like, how do you think about
there's
that?
nothing that we do that's particularly quantitative or deliberate in that way. Like literally
Really?
nothing. Like
Why not? Because don't people
know
say
what?
you got to follow these rules?
Yeah, people say that you have to follow these rules, but here's the bottom line. Finding an extraordinary company is hard enough.
Yeah, fair.
That's it. Like if you find extraordinary companies and invest in them as early as possible, you'll be just fine. And like that is actually the rare thing. Isn't the ownership, it isn't the price, it isn't like any of those things. The rare thing is the extraordinary company.
Yeah.
And so like, and so like, you know, and I think part of what happens actually, and you know, if you're trying to scale it and you're trying to have all these layers and you're trying to, you know, like one of the nice things is right now there's like 4 of us who are active investors, but like there are 4 to 6 of us at any given point in time at Benchmark. You're kind of like, there's 4 of us. It's very high trust between us. We're equal partners. So everyone's incentives are exactly the same. We're not trying to scale anything. And so as a result of that, you can just have like a high conviction and you don't have to we can just search for the extraordinary and not worry about it. I think when you are trying to scale it and you have all these layers and everything, you put all these guidelines and rules in place to kind of prevent mistakes, like prevent big holes, prevent like, but I think the rarest thing is just the extraordinary company. And so you just don't want to lose focus that the first, second, and third order things we're looking for.
Yeah.
Is that.
So then why do you think it's gotten to that point where everyone has all these rules and stuff?
Because I think they're trying to scale. I think it's just like, it's like if you have 20 investors at different levels, everyone's trying to make a career, incentives are misaligned, and like you're trying to control things and you don't want like, because it's really easy, you know, someone said like, it's really easy to write checks. Like
you can literally go to any founder and it's like, there's a price that they would probably take money, whether or not it makes any sense.
Right. And so like, it's really easy to have money go out the door. It's a lot harder to get money to come back in.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, you set these, like, it's like, why does a company, you know, when a company first starts and you have a few founders, there's just high trust and everything else. Like if someone goes and travels for a conference, like they don't have an expense policy. The company just started.
They could, in theory, spend like $100,000 on a party. They could host Snoop Dogg performing,
like,
or something.
In general, there's like trust between the founders. There should be. There's trust between the founders, and you understand like, hey, this is like it's our joint viability, and we're working together to try to achieve this outcome and everything else. Now, as the company starts to scale, what you do is you start to add controls. You start to add like policies. You start to add like, hey, fix this. Like, hey, you can't do this. You can only spend $100 on a hotel room, and you need to take like Uber X instead of Uber Black or whatever it is. Like, you know, like you know, if you fly more than 17 hours, then you can take a business class seat or whatever. Like you have all these policies, but at the beginning, you don't have any of that. And it's kind of the same kind of thing, I think, in venture, which is like, as you get bigger and you're trying to scale and you have more funds and you have more investors and you have more people who are like doing things, then you add more policies, process.
So you kind of think about it as just like the current investment policy or strategy of Benchmark is find generational companies, like do $1 billion in revenue.
It's the current, it's the past, and it's the future.
That's it.
Like it's
almost too easy.
It's
like I feel like someone would want to.
It's both so easy and so difficult.
Yeah, so like I feel like
hard.
You get a consultant in here, like a McKinsey consultant, like no, we need to make a 30-page like checklist and like all these guidelines and stuff.
Yeah, it's really funny because it is actually what venture is, I think, at its essence, which is like back the best entrepreneurs with the biggest ideas, and then go after it. Like that's it.
Yeah. So then
not that hard.
You talked a little bit about there's other funds out there. They're a lot bigger, different incentives. I think it's like a common question that comes up with if you have a smaller vehicle of capital. It's probably kind of funny. Like somebody in the 90s, I think I think the last benchmark fund was 600
Yeah,
something
it's something
million.
like, he's just about $500 million. Yeah.
But yeah, that's like relatively not that large compared to some of the other ones out there.
Yeah.
How do you guys kind of articulate what you do differently when you're coming up against one of these like massive funds that when we talk about, they can just be like, oh, we'll give you twice the money, 3 times better deal. How do you usually stack up in those?
I mean, I think the way, like, and I inherited this, I didn't, just to be clear, like I inherited a great brand and great results for a really long time, right? And as did basically most of the current partners at Benchmark. And so we're beneficiaries of that. And so just like, it's just worth acknowledging that
Okay.
point. So, you know, I think people understand, like, it's not the fund size and deployment and all this stuff is not really a restriction for us. Like, we have flexibility in that context in a way that maybe others don't. So I think that part of it's not really the thing. The biggest thing though for us is, because there's a small number of us and we care very deeply about deep partnerships with entrepreneurs, we can only make a smaller number of investments. Like, we just make a smaller number of investments than most firms. And so you're working on that partnership with a special set of entrepreneurs, and then you're going to pour your heart and soul into helping that company be successful. And so, like, that's the dynamic. And, you know, I think by and large, like, entrepreneurs feel that difference, and they feel that spirit of partnership, and they feel that contribution, and like, that's when it works, it's magical.
But couldn't the counter to that argument be there's only like one of you or maybe 4 people on the team, maybe have some like partner emeritus, a couple people on the table. What some of these other funds, they have a bunch of recruiters that can help you,
Totally.
marketing people that can help you. There's like an army that can come.
Yeah.
Like, don't some founders want that?
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But it's not necessarily someone who'd work with Benchmark wants more of the board member that's going to spend a lot of time.
I think that, like, one of the things that I really believe is, you're like, you know, look, at the end of the day, every company does, any successful company is going to do their own recruiting, is going to do their own engineering management, is going to do their own sales, is going to do, like, that's part of what the company is. Like,
so is it all like just bullshit VCs saying
no,
that they do
no,
it?
that's bullshit. Like, there could be bootstrap stuff in it. I'm sure there's actually value in, like, other things. It's not like, you know, it's like, do we make customer intros? Sure. Like, sometimes we make customer intros. Like, for people, it's all like bootstrappy stuff. But in the end, that's not the end state of it.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, and like, look, there's so much amazing content. Everyone's going to, like, listen to all of your podcasts. And so they're going to have, like, all of this founder information downloaded into their brains, and they're going to have, you know, hopefully a network of people that they're talking to and everything else. So, like, and especially now relative to 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, there's like infinitely more resources available to entrepreneurs, which is, I think, super positive in terms of blogs and podcasts and advice and content and success stories. So all of that's available. The hard thing is having somebody who, like, knows enough about your business and the context of your business and the people inside your business that are making decisions and everything else, and your market and everything else, but also, like, isn't, like, in the trenches every day. So, like, just like,
so they're enough removed to give you
enough removed to give you perspective.
Yep.
But have enough knowledge where they can actually be useful in it. Because I think, for, you know, at the end of the day, for a founder making a decision, a hard decision, right? Like, by the very nature, as it starts to scale, they have something that's like, it's like 51-49. Like, it's a hard decision. Reasonable people could disagree. And so, like, and they've read the blogs, and they've listened to the podcasts, and they've listened to all the advice. And so it's like, generic advice on that isn't useful. Like, what's useful is actually is like a sounding board that knows enough of your business, but also is removed enough and has some maybe other patterns that they can be like, hey, have you thought about this? Maybe here's a new way to think about it. Like, okay, like that makes sense, or whatever. And so that's the way I think about it. And like, I think that's a pretty special thing that people feel. And it's really hard to explain. I'm struggling to explain it obviously here. It's like really hard to explain a priori, but I think it's like, it becomes very evident,
Hmm.
when you experience it.
Yeah. Is there anything unique about the partnership model that you have where it's kind of like equal partners? Like, is that truly a differentiator, do you think? Or is there something more than
well,
that?
I think it's a differentiator in terms of how we work, and then that probably manifests in different ways, which is it's a flat equal partnership. So a dollar comes in, we split it 5 ways or 4 ways, depending on how many people there are. And each of us owns a quarter or fifth or sixth of the firm. And so, when you're in that kind of model, like it's just like it's equal control, equal say, equal economics, all incentives are aligned. It's just a really special way to work. Like partnerships are kind of weird dynamics in that.
Kind of like a 4-way marriage almost. Or
Yeah,
something.
it's a weird, it's kind of weird that way, but I think of it as a communist collective of capitalists.
Okay.
And so like but it's a really special structure that the founders set up, and I think allows us to recruit the best, obviously, to join us, and also just is like an incredible platform that aligns everybody, so everybody's incented to help every company.
Yeah, that's what I thought was interesting. Where it's like it's not someone's deal, quote unquote. I also hate that word when people are like, God, what deals are you looking at right now? I'm like, I don't even think about it as like a deal.
Yeah,
That's kind of like
think of it as a deal.
inhumane. But yeah, it's kind of interesting where everyone's incentivized to help someone else's portfolio companies, which I guess this is surprising to me when I heard it. Is like sometimes you don't want to actually help portfolio companies for the same firm.
Yeah,
Like,
that's kind of crazy.
kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and and the deal thing is also kind of weird too, because it's like I think of this as like where you mentioned Spencer's. I've been on the Spencer's board for 10 and a half years, I think. It's more than a decade. Like that's a long time.
Yeah.
And you're working with these people for a really long time, and so don't cheapen it.
Yeah.
Like that's and that would be the advice I'd give any founder also who's like looking at investors, is like, these are really long-term decisions.
Yeah.
Just like it behooves you to get it right.
So then with that dynamic of there's like 4 people all making the decisions, how do you make an investment decision at Benchmark? Is it everyone has to agree on something?
It's not everyone has to agree. The answer is, so when you meet a company that you like, you want to get other perspectives on it. So you're going to start calling people, who might be knowledgeable in the area. You might be doing references on it, but you'll definitely have other partners meet. And it's actually like reasonably common for us to have 2 or 3 partners meet in the first meeting. Like we do that all the time.
Nice.
If someone's referred us in a way that they're like,
you should strongly consider this.
Yeah, then we'll put people in the meeting, like people like, hey, this is really interesting. It could be more interesting for you to me or whatever. We'll get a couple partners together. And like, that's a very special thing. And so you'll have other partners meet, and then the partners will ask questions like, this is what I would think about. These are the different dynamics and whatever. But it's an advocacy model, right? It's a high trust advocacy model. So ultimately, the kind of sponsoring partner, or the lead partner or whatever on it, it's like they're kind of taking all this feedback from all these people and putting it together, from the partners and everyone else, and putting it together and trying to make the best decision for the firm. And then we do a vote and all this other stuff. But I think the vote and everything is irrelevant relative to the advocacy and the conversation.
That makes sense. Okay. One thing I want to kind of step back a little bit, go maybe back to like your backstory. I read that your senior year of high school, you like didn't do senior year of high school.
I did not. That's correct.
So what happened there?
I kind of run out of math and science at the school I was at. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee.
I feel like you still have like a little bit of a southern accent. I don't know if I'd say southern, but it's like,
if I drink a little bourbon, it really comes out.
Yeah. Well, I'm Canadian, and I don't have I say sorry and I say mom, but you probably couldn't tell unless I told you that I'm Canadian.
I would not have guessed.
So.
Yeah. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I came out to college after my junior year, and then, been here in California ever since.
And then you went to USC for
I
kind
went
of
to
like
USC for 1 year, and then I transferred to Stanford, and then I studied mathematical and computational science at Stanford. And, it was like I graduated in 99, which was just like an amazing time.
yeah, and then you
Just
did
because
banking, like tech banking.
I did tech
right at the
banking
high.
for like 7 months,
Okay.
which was kind of a good way to learn a little bit. And,
What was just the general takeaway just from that time period?
I had never taken a finance class or an accounting class or anything else. So I just like learned so much like of the basics of that. Like then, I mean, whatever you can learn in a few months, but
Yeah.
it
You
was
learn
great
within the
experience.
first 6 months, you have a basic understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, I think you have like, some idea, which I think ended up being really fruitful
Yeah.
for me and useful. And then I joined Marc and Ben at LoudCloud. I started as Ben Horowitz's assistant.
How did that come about? Was he like hanging out at the bank and he's like, hey, I need that guy to come?
It's kind of a long, convoluted story, but basically a cousin of mine who actually is a tech founder as well. He's the CEO of Profit Security, Kamal. His classmate or friend was at LoudCloud. LoudCloud was still in stealth at the time, and they were looking for somebody to be Ben's assistant, and he sent my resume over.
And then just
I
clicked?
Yeah, I clicked and met Marc and Ben, and
Okay.
it clicked. And
what was LoudCloud again?
LoudCloud was like, it was literally the first cloud. It was just like pre-virtualization, so it didn't quite work out that way. Yeah.
What does that mean, pre-virtualization? So like you could only rent one computer, not multiple?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You had like each computer was separate, and virtualization enabled the abstraction of virtualization. Really unlocked AWS, like allowed AWS ultimately to exist.
They could have like one server that 1,000 people rented. You had to rent one server.
Yeah,
with LoudCloud.
exactly.
Okay.
And you're just like, and you basically are building these stacks, and so yeah, that's what LoudCloud was. That was 99. AWS really S3 I think was like 07. So just to give you, it was early.
Oh wow, yeah, this was like 7 years then.
Yeah.
So then you joined. I think I saw on your LinkedIn January of 2000. So this is like the top,
I think it was
top of the
January 2000. Yeah.
I mean, what was that like? Just that process of joining a tech
company?
So
fun.
like,
it was so fun. It was a special company, and the talent there was just amazing. And so we, but it had its ups and downs. Like the company kind of evolved. Then we had to like pivot and as a public company and switch from LoudCloud to become Opsware, and then kind of continue to grow that as a software company for many years, for 5 or 6 years, until we were bought by Hewlett Packard in 2007.
So what exactly was the pivot?
It went from being like actually a cloud provider to selling the software that made the cloud.
So other cloud providers bought your software?
Exactly. Other people who were managing large data centers. Yeah.
Was that like, what caused that? Was it just a better
less capital intensive, a better model, like especially for that time.
And then probably the less capital intensive was probably important, like as the capital markets dried up.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And then it was just like the world was, I think, more ready for that than it was for LoudCloud at that point in time.
Do you see any like parallels or differences between like where we're currently at and maybe like parts of the 90s or the early 2000s?
People like want to draw these like things, and I think you get a lot. I hear a lot of like AI internet analogies.
Yeah.
And and maybe I actually used one, I guess, in terms of Google, but like they're each quite different. I think one of the big differences is the internet was a distribution mechanism. It wasn't just a technology. Like AI is a technology. It's not a distribution mechanism. And mobile was a distribution mechanism in addition to a technology as well. And so like, I think that matters actually in this dynamic. I think they had distribution. And that's part of why I like the transistor analogy better. But I think part of the reason that people use that is because it was like a lot of people were alive during that era. And so they have some memory of that evolution happening. I really do mean it's like there's a recency bias. in it, but it's like actually there's probably better analogies. I mean, there may be even one if I went back to the abacus or something like that, like that would be even better. But but I think the transistor is like very capital intensive, like big initial investment, ultimately infiltrated everything, like, really technology forward versus like outside in. Like I think there's a lot of dynamics that are very consistent with the transistor.
I think some feedback I got from people just talking to them before we recorded this, like a lot of them were like, "Oh, Eric would be a great CEO. Like he should go back and be a founder." You actually did.
I definitely should not.
But you actually did do it once, right? You started a company. What was the company?
It was RockMelt. It was a social browser. I did do that. It was very hard.
So what was the general like thesis and product? Because I don't remember this. I was in probably sophomore year of high school, 2007. So maybe I was that was my sophomore year.
Yeah. Okay.
High
So
school?
we started, I think we launched in 2010
Okay.
and then we were bought in 2013.
Okay.
But it was
my college years.
Yeah. It was a social browser. It was like literally a browser. Chromium had come out, like Chrome had come out, and Chromium was the open source project behind Chrome, still is. And we took Chromium and we basically built chat into it. We built sharing into it. We built notifications. We built cloud sync, like all features. We all signed into our browsers today and everything, but at that time we didn't. And so like all of this was like,
it was like a sign into your browser.
Yeah, sign into your browser. Your friends were on one side, notifications and feeds were on another. You had share, you had sync across devices. Like all of that stuff existed.
So you kind of brought in like AIM or like
like
it was
Facebook chat
type of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then you had a feed of like RSS feed or
like
different
RSS feeds and social feeds into it.
So you'd have a Facebook post, a tweet, and like an RSS from like a blog post.
Yeah,
all in the same feed.
Yeah, and it worked a little differently than that. It's a little hard to imagine, but yes, it worked differently than that. But yeah, the same ideas.
Okay, and then it was a browser. You could just go.
But it's browser,
like browse things. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think you sold it to Yahoo.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you joined Benchmark pretty soon after that.
About a year after.
Or two?
Yeah, about a year after that. Yeah.
How did that come about? Because there's probably a lot of people that they're like, oh, how do you get a job at Benchmark? Or like, how does that happen?
Yeah. I mean, like, look, most of these things are like long-standing relationships that you have with people. Like I had gotten to meet Peter and Peter Fenton and Bill Gurley like many years before. I'd pitched them obviously over the years when I was an entrepreneur. So I got to know them a little bit through that. So, that's kind of the beginning of it, I would say. Jim Getz at Sequoia had told me in 2008, had kind of suggested that I consider venture. And he kind of planted that seed in my head. And then like 6 years later, it kind of like, it came back and itched at me. And it's like, oh, maybe I should really do that. And so that was influential. I'm very grateful to him for that.
How did you decide Benchmark versus maybe other options that were out there?
I think it was like a perfect fit for my personality. Like it is perfect fit for my personality. And as I said, like one of the nice things about the equal partnership and the dynamic is like, it's really hard to be to say no. Like it was a good fit for me. I really like the people. And then you're like, oh, well, like you're an equal partner here. Like that's a pretty good thing for someone who's never invested. And so,
it's pretty generous.
It's super generous. It's super generous on the way in.
Yeah.
It's super generous on the way in.
And then speaking about getting in, I think your first investment that you made pretty quick after you joined.
Yeah.
What was that one and how did it go?
Yeah. So the first investment was Confluent.
It's public now, right?
Yeah. It's Confluent's a public company. And so that was amazing. And it's been, really tremendous to be able to work with Jay and Neha and June, who are the founders of Confluent. And that was like one of these ones that walked in, they had an open source project, Kafka, we invested, and like, here we are. And turned it into, a $1 billion plus revenue business and like kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And so, and then the second one was Spenser.
Yeah.
Amplitude.
Another public company, 2 for 2. You should have just retired right there.
Yeah. And so, and I've gotten to work on a bunch of really great ones.
Yeah. What all did you learn from Spenser?
Oh God. The thing that I really appreciate, he talked about learning mentality. Like he is he's a learner, he's a professional learner. um, and really like a first principles thinker. And so I just really appreciate it. It's actually, I think it's a characteristic of a lot of these MIT guys or MIT people is like they really like think from first principles and reason out. And I really appreciated that about him.
Hmm. Well, and I think there's another one that you've done a little bit more recently. It's called Fireworks. It's like I'm probably going to butcher this description of it, but it's like tools for developers to incorporate a bunch of models. I don't know if I
I think
that
of it as
correctly,
inference cloud. I think of it as inference cloud. So Lin Chao, who kind of ran the PyTorch engineering team at Facebook and from the early days to scale, her and a bunch of her collaborators like came out and formed this company, Fireworks. And originally it was going to be a PyTorch cloud. Actually, it's about a 2.5-year-old company. So it's going to be a PyTorch cloud. And then, Gen AI was happening and she realized like, hey, we need to move up a layer in abstraction, basically provide all these open source models and custom models and tailored models for people and can run them. Turns out running large models is not trivial. And so that's what they've done. And they've done outstandingly well in scaling that business. It's one of our faster growing, scaling companies.
It's in that 5 or 6
It's
companies.
in that 5 or 6 companies that has scaled tremendously quickly.
So maybe dumb question, but what do people pay when they're paying for something like that? Is it like paying for?
You pay for tokens.
Okay.
I think a lot of the pricing model is basically tokens.
Do you think that's going to change at all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think all these business models are going to evolve. Like, you go from paying for commute to paying for tokens. Maybe you pay for something else over time.
What do you think is the end state of business?
Hard to say. I think like for a lot of the application companies, they're going to charge consumers, I think, on an outcome basis. Like, I think one of the things that Sierra is doing for customer service is like they're charging on an outcome basis, which is like what are tickets resolved? So it's like, hey, instead of paying for labor or instead of paying for tokens, you just like pay for like business outcome. Like, what do you care about? Tickets resolved. Okay, we'll like pay for that. So I think that's kind of cool at the application layer. The question at the infrastructure layer, you normally go down a level. And so I think that's going to be, that'll continue to evolve and change.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a very clear ROI if somebody knows what things are worth to them,
totally.
About knowing what they are comfortable paying. So I could see that being an actual faster sale, maybe too.
Sure,
like getting
it's like low risk incentives are aligned.
Yeah, where it's not just like you hear these horror stories of somebody like leaving AWS like a container running, or like I think Coinbase had like a $55 million Datadog bill because they did something like it showed up on an earnings call once because it was just such a massive amount.
Yeah, totally.
How has your perception of investors changed after becoming one yourself?
I think you realize like it's a really hard job in its own way. Like it's a very different job than being a founder.
So what did you think the job was back when you were like pitching everyone?
I think it realized like the job. Then I always thought that the hard part of the job would be picking. I still think the hard part of the job is picking. I gravitate towards the like supporting, I would say, like in trying to work with founders is what I love. But there's, I think the hard part of the job is picking. Like that's definitely the hardest part of the job. And I think it's kind of hard in its own way. But yeah, the job, it's a very different, I would say, like the highs are less high than being a founder. The lows are less low than being a founder. And you kind of have this like perpetual obtuse stress that's like very long lived.
You're saying as an investor?
As an investor, whereas I think as a founder, you have very acute stress, like on a day-to-day basis. And so it's just a very like long-lived, obtuse, dull stress. But it's really cool if you like learning. And I love learning, and every meeting is a chance to learn about a new market, learn about new technology, try to understand the psychology of an individual. Like, it's just like, there's so much alchemy in that. And I love those elements of it.
So one thing that Saji at Benchling mentioned was, he said, you've been really helpful on just building a management team and recruiting. How, if I'm just like a founder and maybe I just raised 20 million bucks, looks like we might have something here.
Yeah.
There's just a couple of us, or maybe we have like a couple of BDRs, want to hire like a head of sales, or like we want to bring on like a new head of engineering. I'm not sure like what, it's a pretty abstract, but how would you approach just starting to think about doing some of this heavier executive recruiting and building a management team?
Well, like one, I'm a big believer in the team building and like very big believer in leadership building, like just building out the leaders in the company. I think that's actually the rarest thing inside of companies isn't people to do work. The rarest thing is leaders to lead work. And and the first step of it is actually to define what you need, and really defining what you need. It's easier said than done, but it's really defining like, what do you need?
So like, how do you do that? First,
Well,
it's
it's just like understanding like who are the customers that you're going after? What's the type of sale? What is the motion? If you're talking about sales, like what is the motion? How quickly do you think it can scale? Like those kind of elements of it. What is the culture and personality of the company? Like all of those characteristics, and really getting clear eyed on that. And then, you want to meet a variety of people that fit different profiles to see what that is, like survey the landscape a little bit so that you can understand like, okay, this is what it is. Cause like one of the tricks is you want to hire for strength. You want to hire for someone's superpower. You don't want to hire for lack of weakness. And so lack of weakness is a path to mediocrity. It's a path to not great results.
So you'd rather hire somebody who's really, really good.
Yeah, totally.
Best in class at something,
100%.
but they suck at something else.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the values aren't that deep, but like,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
You hire for strength, not lack of weakness.
Interesting. Okay.
And you're building those teams, and you'll always compensate and like have to do that. But the mediocrity thing is bad. These companies, they don't want to exist. Like the world doesn't want startups to exist. The world doesn't want new startups to succeed. Like it's just, the world's indifferent to them. And so the very act of existence or growing is it's like an act of will. And like will requires spikes and requires like, it requires like fight and grit and spikes. And so like, you gotta be hiring for these, like for those spikes. You're looking for those spikes.
How do you find those? Or maybe in other words, how do you avoid mediocrity?
Well, you're going to end up, I always, there's a set of executive recruiters that I would always like work with because I think they like help manage everything, and which is amazing. Like I love using Andy Price at Artisanal, and we use him in a bunch of searches, and I've worked with him 20 times probably over all of these searches. And there are others, of course, too. And so you want to work with them because they help like manage the process and help you run it, right? And then you just really want to get a clear-eyed picture of what you're looking for, and then really evaluate against that. And then you want to reference the hell out of them.
How do you reference someone?
You do, front references, backdoor references. You do everything. You call them, and then you ask them around the characteristics that you're looking for. And you ask people to get specific, and you spend time on it, and you do them yourself.
Do a lot of people outsource it?
Well, a lot of times the recruiter does a lot of references and stuff like that. Yeah, that happens a lot.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, recruiters, especially as companies get bigger, recruiters do a lot of the references.
I can see the incentives of that, of just let's just make sure this guy gets hired. I need to get paid.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I heard you say something once I thought was kind of interesting. You said the best CEOs make all the new mistakes.
They make all new mistakes.
Yeah, all new mistakes. Yeah. So, I mean, I have an idea of what that might mean, but I just thought it was an interesting line. Like, what does that mean?
I mean, it relates to the whole learning thing. I guess it's the opposite of it, which is like, it's if you're learning, then you're not making the same mistake over and over again. Yeah. And so you're just making all new mistakes, and that's kind of what it means.
So they might not make that many mistakes, but they're always
I think
repeating.
Look, any of these things are like, these companies are hard, and they're not a mistake. You should be making mistakes. Like, I don't think we should be afraid of mistakes. Like we should be making mistakes. Like every one of these companies is all messed up. Every one of these hypergrowth companies is messed up. It feels chaotic internally. There's like things that are wrong. Like it's just like they're hard.
How do you
And
identify what are okay problems and what are just like existential, like this shouldn't be messed up type of a problem?
yeah, I mean, I think you really have to understand, like, is this a problem that's a result of scale or quick growth or like whatever, or is this a problem as a result of like we're in a strategic cul-de-sac, and if you're in a strategic cul-de-sac, you need to like find a way out of it. And
Strategic cul-de-sac, what does that mean exactly?
just like you're like literally like you for whatever reason you've ended up in a place that
Oh, like a
is
dead
like
end.
yeah, dead end, like
Oh,
it's
got it.
unlikely
Okay.
to exist in the long term.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And you had one thing earlier that you referenced about like, companies going public.
Yeah.
It was kind of, I wanted to ask you about it earlier, but it didn't make sense. But you said something like, what do you think about the current landscape of like, should there be more public companies? Like,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So why are
There's
companies not going public?
Well, we've been in a very weird market environment, right? Like a lot of companies went public in 21. There was a hangover as a result of that, and the economy slowed and all this other stuff. Now we're in our own chaotic environment. I thought it was going to open back up, and obviously CoreWeave went public, which is cool, and there was more coming, and then that whatever. So, yeah, we're in this place where we're a little bit stuck on it. But yeah, I think it would be good if companies went public, and it's going pro. Like it's like, going to the big leagues. And I think it's just, I think it makes the companies better, honestly. It's hard. The stocks are volatile and like whatever it can be oftentimes and get bounced around. But, like you mentioned the biggest tech companies in the world, they're all public companies.
Yeah, fair. What do you think what's the argument on the other side though? It's that, you have to go through all these different regulatory, you have to do like,
I mean, the
audit
regulatory stuff,
and
yeah, but like, I don't know, like, these companies are big enough where like, it's not like if you're a big private company, you're not doing audits. Like you should be doing audits. Like you should be doing audits and like doing that kind of stuff. There's like whatever, 10 more people in finance and legal. Who cares? Like it's kind of irrelevant.
you really don't think it's that big of a deal?
No, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Because that's actually like a pretty big, it feels like that's a big argument against. Or do you think it shouldn't be?
Like it shouldn't be an argument against. Like, and if you're a 1,000-person company, like who cares? Like that's kind of irrelevant. I think the bigger, there's real volatility. You're doing stuff. I think people would make an argument that, you're focused on the short term versus the long term. I feel like that's the argument that you hear the most.
Being public, you have to focus on quarterly.
You focus
earnings.
on quarterly and short term, and you deal with the volatility associated with that. Whereas as long term, you as a private company, you don't have to deal with that volatility. You do have to deal with stock price volatility, and that's a real thing.
Yeah, and I guess like the other argument is just like there's just so much capital in the private markets too. Maybe it's easier. Is it easier to raise privately or?
I mean, I think it's. I don't know. I think that there's a set of really exceptional private companies. I think there's like 4 or 5 of them that can raise a lot of money in the private markets. And
what is this like Databricks, OpenAI,
Sure.
SpaceX, maybe
Stripe,
maybe
yeah. It's probably there's 4. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like people put like Anduril in there now, maybe.
Yeah. And so you're okay, but like there's 1,000 other companies that are like interesting and at some scale. So
yeah,
what are they going to do? And like, and by the way, I think the capital raising thing is also not, I mean, hopefully all those companies at this point are making money like they should be. And maybe OpenAI isn't, but like most of them are making money.
Yeah, at least have
and so-
certain product lines or just different business segments that like
Right.
are profitable, and you're like investing in growth, and there's
Right.
capex in this new business, and
So like, yeah, they should be able to do that. And like, if you look at the best founders of all time and you look at what Bezos was able to do, and like, it's not like Bezos was unable to like start new businesses. Like he started new businesses all the time and continued to innovate. Elon's done that at Tesla, and obviously Google's done that over and over again. Microsoft's done that over and over again. Apple's done that over and over again.
Yeah.
Like,
Is there anything that you've learned from public market investors as an early stage?
Oh yeah, tons of things. Yeah, probably the most important thing on the painful lesson from 2021 is even great companies can be overvalued.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's my thing. That is like singed in my brain now.
How do you think about valuation then? Like, is there certain things where you see something like that is objectively probably overpriced?
Well,
and like
I think about valuation at scale. That's very different than valuation at the early stages. Like valuation at the early stages is really about like, what do you think the potential outcome is, and are you getting paid for the risk reward? Like that's what it is, like really. And so that's a very subjective thing. That's like very hard to put a number. It's not quantitative at all. Valuation for public companies is a little bit different, because there are more metrics. There are things you can look at. There's a quantitative element around it, and then there are error bars. And like that's kind of how I think about it anyway.
Well, yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Awesome, so fun. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, appreciate it.
And thank you for listening. If you missed it, make sure to check out last week's episode with Sajith and Samsara, and subscribe to my newsletter, The Split, in the description to get future episodes plus a transcript emailed directly to your inbox. And don't forget, Bolt is hosting the world's largest hackathon, which kicked off on May 30th and runs through the month of June. Get free Bolt Pro, over $1 million in prizes, 30,000 people already signed up, and it takes just one idea to get started. Join at hackathon.dev. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.